fellow Nigerians. My name is George Uboh, Chairman George Uboh TV. Today is Wednesday, August 19, 2020. I'm here to discuss a very important issue regarding the Vice President. On Monday, August 10, 2020, I wrote a letter to the Vice President giving the Vice President an ultimatum to respond to Nigerians and explain to Nigerians why he took a certain action that we deemed tantamount to interference in criminal investigation. Now, the evidence in our possession has to do with a letter Okono Obla, then chairman of Special Presidential Investigation Panel, wrote to the Auditor General Ayine in 2018, March 2018 precisely. And in that letter, Obla attached a purported two-page withdrawals of 5 billion naira tranches, 5 billion naira each, from the NHIS, the National Health Insurance Scheme, alluding to the fact that it was withdrawn by the Auditor General's office. Now, instead of the Auditor General to answer Obla's letter, Auditor General wrote the Vice President, Professor VP Osinbajo, asking for guidance on how to go about the matter, precisely whether Obla had the mandate to investigate him. The Vice President acquiesced to such a request and wrote a letter through his Chief of Staff, the Deputy Chief of Staff, Adeipaye. And in that letter to Obla, a two-pronged question was asked. This is the letter. A two-pronged letter was asked. The two-pronged question was whether the Special Investigation Panel for the Recovery of Public Property has received a mandate to investigate the alleged illegal withdrawal of NHIS funds, 1, and 2, if there is such a mandate, an explanation of efforts made to clarify the role members of the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation may have played on the matter, including the nexus, that is the link, between the Office of the Auditor General and the alleged NHIS funds withdrawal. Armed with this evidence, of course, Obla responded and answered the two-pronged questions. Armed with this evidence, we wrote the Vice President August 10, 2020, asking the Vice President to explain why his action should not be construed as interference in criminal investigation. In the same letter, we made it clear that what was trending on social media, that the vice president was involved in the actual withdrawal of the 10 billion. We made it clear in the letter that we are not associated with such allegation. We disassociated ourselves from such allegation and made it clear that our allegation is limited to possible interference in the criminal investigation. That same day, the vice president replied. This is the reply, although received on the 13th. The vice president thanked us for removing ourselves from the 10 billion naira withdrawal allegations. Went into the fact that there wasn't any 10 billion naira withdrawal. Talked about Uboh's rudeness and cruel way of writing letters. Then went into the meat of the allegation, that the act setting up the special presidential investigation panel actually makes it clear that the investigation, that any investigation carried out by Uboh has to be initiated or has to flow from the president vis-a-vis presidency. The vice president elicited the pertinent part of a letter Uboh wrote in November 2017 when he got the appointment, in which Uboh more or less signed an undertaking that he will not investigate any case unless initiated or directed or sent from the president vis-a-vis presidency. The vice president cited another case law. The case of, it's an appeals court case, the case of Tijani Musa Tumsa versus Federal Republic of Nigeria, in which the Court of Appeal held that Uboh-led special investigation panel is not permitted to investigate any case except sent or directed by the president vis-a-vis presidency. And to the best of our knowledge, that case was not appealed, so it remains a final judgment. The vice president closed the letter by asking us to, if we find his explanation plausible, to disseminate to the public with the same vigor. Now, this letter was given to lawyers within our organization, laymen within our organization, lawyers outside our organization, and laymen outside our organization. And we got divergent opinions. But because the final decision rests upon me, I took my time to sit down and write the reply. Now, in my reply, I thanked the vice president for responding expeditiously, which is in the spirit of the Freedom of Information Act. I went into the issue of Uboh's rudeness. I made it known in my letter that I am a victim of Uboh's rudeness. I attached a letter I wrote Uboh in which, after reading a newspaper article in which Uboh stated that the panel recovered, I think, about $200 million or $220 million, and that the panel would keep the name of the bank confidential, but that the bank is in the process of making payments in installments for sake of liquidity. So I wrote Uboh and merely simply asked Uboh to take cognizance of the fact that my organization, Panic Alert Security Systems Limited, during the pendency of our engagement by the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami-San, that is in February, March 2016, way before Uboh was engaged, that we traced such account. And I said, look, even if you did not mention the name of the account, I'm sorry, the name of the bank, I went ahead and mentioned the name of the bank, Sky Bank. Then went ahead to adduce places I've taken that tracing to the Attorney General of the Federation, the former Minister of Finance, Akemi Adeosun, NNPC itself, because it's an NNPC account we wrote, the former DGSSS, Lawa Daura, and the AO to the President, Mekano. Now, when Uboh responded to my letter, putting aside the fact that Uboh did not address the matter head-on, Uboh ended the letter by stating that such letter will be construed as cheap blackmail of the presidential panel and by extension the federal government of Nigeria. My attorneys then, this all happened in April 2019, last year. My attorneys then wanted us to reply him. I declined. Now, in my response to the Vice President, I had to lay this foundation to let the Vice President's office know that ordinarily, any matter regarding Uboh I wouldn't touch, because due to the letter he wrote me, there is some bad blood. But because of the patriotism, the national interest, which overrides any personal interest, I had to take on this matter, even if it involves someone who was rude to me. And I stated to that this matter, rudeness is not within the ambit of the resolution of this matter, because this is a separate and distinct matter. So now I went into the real issues. In resolving the issue of the mandate, I recognize clearly that Uboh, in his reply to the Vice President's query, if I can use that word, argued that he has the mandate to investigate. The Vice President, in his letter to our organization, is just saying that you can investigate, but you have to wait till we give you the cases to investigate. So I think Uboh kind of missed it. So in other words, nobody is saying you don't have the mandate to investigate, but you wait till we give you the cases to investigate. And more damning is the fact that Uboh himself wrote an undertaking in November 2017 to this effect, that he will not take on any cases unless directed or sent from the president vis-a-vis presidency. So that I find it problematic that someone who wrote an undertaking in November 2017, in March 2018, when you are writing a letter to the same Vice President whose office you gave the undertaking. You now argue that you have the mandate to investigate. You forgot about the undertaking you gave. So this is like a selective amnesia. So that was used against Obla in reaching my decision. Then I went further to say, let's assume for sake of argument, without conceding, that Obla, being a lawyer, may have said, hey, if I have the power to investigate, and I have the power to investigate without the president sending cases to me, I cannot waive such power. So the undertaking I gave is null and void. I can renege on that. But there is a problem. The appeals court case. The appeals court case is clear that you cannot investigate unless the president sends cases to you. So even if you're able to surmount the undertaking you gave, you cannot surmount the decision of the appeals court, which you did not appeal to the Supreme Court. So in our opinion, that is a final judgment. So it puts Obla between a rock and a hard place. You have the undertaking he took, that is very, very indicting, and you have an appeals court case, all together, jamming him in the middle. So based on that, fellow Nigerians, I reached the decision that the vice president did not interfere in the investigation of Auditor General Ayeni. Now the second issue is the issue of disseminating such decision to the public. Some lawyers within and outside my organization were of the opinion that I should stay clear, our organization should stay clear from that, because that would be synonymous to playing the role of a PR firm for the vice president. I want to say clearly, unequivocally, and unambiguously that I totally disagree with that. And these are my reasons. The civil society organization, the civil society space, bridges the gap between the masses and the government on any, in most cases, on contentious issues. What that means is, whatever information the civil society gets, you let the public know. Now, we in the civil society space, we are quick to accuse the government when the government does not, or government officials and organizations refuse to give us information, say under the Freedom of Information Act. We are quick to criticize the government when they are shielding information from us. Well, because they owe us that for sake of public interest. Well, the same thing we owe the public for sake of public interest to disseminate to the public. So if you now say, my friends, that our organization, George Uboh Whistleblowers Network, should hold this information, then we will be drinking from the same cup of non-disclosure. That cup of non-disclosure, that culpability, we are quick to accuse that the government officials and organizations point of view. You have written a letter. In fact, the letter we wrote the vice president, it wasn't an accusation per se. it was more or less to show cause so we can let the Nigerian public know. We asked the vice president to explain to the Nigerian public, explain why we should not deem you unfit to be our vice president, because that position you are holding it in trust. Now he has explained. If we now say that we are not going to let the public know, that means ab initio we were hoping for him to fall into the trap so we can let the public know that he interfered, because then that would have been our preconceived notion, our mindset ab initio, that he did that. So anything that falls short of that, we are not interested. I disagree, and the God I serve will not allow me to do that. What goes for the goose must go for the gander. And I wrote too that I'm not unmindful of the fact that, yes, news that the VP interfered in investigation, news that the VP is involved in withdrawing 10 billion naira, these are all sensation. These are things that the public would like to say, oh wow, want to read about, that more than news that the vice president is exonerated. But we are not in this business to gauge what we generate newsworthy items. So I went further to state that apart from our organization disseminate the exoneration of the vice president to the public, I feel that we are duty bound to even urge or advise other activists and civil society organizations to desist from peddling such news, because the evidence in our possession does not support that. Because in the civil society space, we are supposed to work together, which we are going to do now through this medium and other ones, to let other activists to disseminate the evidence the VP sent us to all activists that have come out to speak on this, so that they will not take cognizance of the fact that you have not heard from this man, you have heard from him. Based on this evidence, you just pretty much stop peddling such news because it's not the truth. And for sake of equity and fairness, that is the right thing to do. Anything short of that would be tantamount to unfounded slandering and malice, which I'm not part of. I would want to be seen to run this organization with utmost integrity, with equity and fairness, and to treat everybody fairly. And I have always said that, even when I accused the EFCC back when I went to the Senate, that if any iota of evidence I have, if any document I have is fake, I swore, because I don't engage in that. And this is another case to show what happened with the EFCC, that I was a contractor for the EFCC, but because the love I have for my country is paramount, I severed my relationship to fight the EFCC. Obla, because the whole thing here has to do with Obla-led speed. Obla himself is not somebody that is a friend. If anything, he treated me badly. But that is not the issue. The issue is a national one, and that should take the front seat. So thank you very much, fellow Nigerians. As I have stated, based on what is in our possession, we hereby exonerate Vice President Osinbajo in the 10 billion naira NHIS withdrawal and interference allegations levied against him. Thank you.